Colin Coxall, welcome back to the Tokyo Living podcast.
Thank you, Sam. That's very kind of you to have me back after last time. Thank you.
Yeah, so last time we talked fairly generally about what you do as a cognitive behavioural therapist, and we did want to get you back to talk about some more specific topics. Today's topic is going to be sleep. So this is obviously a fairly hot topic. A lot of people want to know how to optimize sleep. They want to know a little bit more about sleep. It's something that we all do, or probably should do. And it is an important part of the process of living. We spend, between a third and a quarter, perhaps, of our time sleeping. So I think it would be good for everyone to have, a bit more understanding about what goes on when they shut their eyes at night, and if there's strategies that they can incorporate to improve the quality and or quantity of their sleep, in particular for people who really struggle in this area. So I thought to get started, maybe just taking a slightly different tact and starting off with a question of, why do humans need sleep? Why is this actually something that we do?
Sam, that's a brilliant question. And the honest answer is I really don't know. I have no idea. And actually, nobody really knows. Nobody has a definitive answer to that. You're right about it being a hot topic. Insomnia is probably the most common problem that I see, actually. Probably 30 to 40% of people will experience insomnia at some point during a year, actually. Severe insomnia, more than 6 months, and kind of not being able to sleep for more than 3 days, probably about 10% of people. All right, so it is a hot topic.
Really? Yeah.
So we know a lot about how to treat it. We know about what insomnia is. The question why people sleep, well, we sleep on average probably 7 to 9 hours, but really that's just an average. I think a range of sleep is between 5 and 11 hours. Okay. So we know what sleep is, we know how long people do it for, but why do people sleep? Again, it could be restorative, to renew cells and, to repair things. But we do that when we're awake anyway. The cells, they repair themselves. It could be about conserving energy. It could be an evolutionary thing, the light-dark cycle. We know that melatonin chemical increases as it gets darker, and that increases sleepiness. We know a lot of things about sleep, but definitively why, nobody really knows. Koalas sleep about 22 hours a day or something ridiculous.
Sounds
Whales
pretty good, doesn't it?
That's not bad. Yeah. Whales never sleep.
Really? Yeah.
Well, they can't, can they? Really, they'd probably drown if they did. There's always one side of their brain switched on. So that's a really long-winded way of saying I have no idea.
We don't know. Yeah. And so, what do we know about sleep? What are some of the basic scientific principles of sleep, the different stages of sleep that perhaps people should know about?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important question, because any interventions around sleep really depend on having a really good understanding of what sleep is, which is a different question about why we sleep. Okay. In fact, asking why we sleep too much will probably keep us awake. Sleep is when we are disengaged from our surroundings and from our environment. But we can still, if somebody walks in to our house or knocks, or we hear a noise, we can still wake up from it. So it's a different state to being unconscious, as it were. We're still alert and aware of our surroundings. There's different stages of sleep. Broadly speaking, the two stages of sleep that we're particularly interested in to understand sleep is what we might call the non-REM sleep, which might be also called delta wave sleep. and also REM sleep. Okay, so REM sleep is rapid eye movement sleep. It's a state of sleep associated with dealing with emotions in the previous day. And people often dream. People dream in deep sleep, but people dream in REM sleep, and it's associated with arranging emotions and resonant things from the previous day, let's say. So it's kind of arranging those connections and memories. I think deep sleep is probably more associated with restorative sleep, and in any one night we would usually have around 5 sleep cycles, and a sleep cycle is roughly 90 minutes. Okay, so there is this idea that we need to sleep sort of between 7 and 9 hours, which is actually the ranges, as I say, really between 5 and 11 hours. So that's the modal, not the modal average, the average for a population. But so we don't actually have those. It's quite rare to have those 5 sleep cycles, those 5 90 minutes connected together. All right, because normally you sleep 90 minutes and you wake up for a short period of time, 90 minutes, then you wake up for a short period of time. And as those sleep cycles go on through the night, you're usually awake for a little bit longer in between the sleep cycles. And you usually remember your dreams as you go on through the sleep cycles, because you're getting more REM sleep, okay, as the night goes on. So the kind of the cycle might be as you go from drowsiness into light sleep, and you go quite deep into the delta wave sleep, and it's like it comes back out, you go into REM sleep, and then so it's like a U shape, you come out of it, you're awake for a little period of time, and you go back into it. Okay, so a long period of unbroken sleep is a little bit of an illusion, because actually you do wake. It's quite normal to wake up 4 or 5 times during the night. It's absolutely fine. Some people might go to the bathroom, or you just turn over.
But some people, you might not actually be conscious that you are waking up, so you might have thought, oh, I've just slept the whole night through, but you've actually gone through those cycles and in effect woken up. How long? So you said those cycles are about 90 minutes or 60 minutes?
90 to 100 minutes,
90 to 100. And so how much of that time is typically spent in delta wave sleep, and how much is typically spent in REM?
That's a great question. Do you want me to check that? I can't remember. I know REM sleep is 25%. Let's have a look. I can find out. Yeah.
And you said typically the length of those phases will increase as the night goes on?
So REM sleep, the proportion of REM sleep increases as the night goes on.
Okay, the proportion of REM increases. Yeah.
So I think you're probably looking at. So, all right, I'm not going to look at the figures. I mean, it's basically, I know REM sleep is kind of roughly around 25. You could say deep sleep, I don't know, I'm guessing, but I mean, basically if your first 2 cycles is made up largely of deep sleep, okay, delta wave sleep. So actually you're getting as much restorative sleep as you need in those first 2 cycles, okay, and then REM sleep increases as the night goes on. So actually after the first 2 or 3 cycles, you've had as much restorative sleep as you actually need, and then the rest is kind of made up of lighter sleep. As I said, I do have the figures, but I can send those to you, Sam. It's going to take me a couple of minutes to put them up. I can't remember off the top of my head.
That's fine. That's fine. So so as you go along through the night's sleep, the proportion of REM sleep increases. So what's the function of that then? So if we're getting more of our restoration during the deep sleep, what's that REM doing for us?
Yeah, so that's the theory. We're getting restoration during the deep sleep phase. So the REM sleep, the rapid eye movement, is associated with creating memories, and it's almost, and that's when we dream. and it's like it's a little bit like a recycle box. Actually, it's dealing with the emotions that we and the events and emotions that we need to maybe keep and learn from. Maybe studying, for example. Sleep is excellent for studying because it helps consolidate our memory. But also, it's a little bit like a recycle box. It's really processing, dealing with, and changing meanings of things that happen to us and memories as well.
Yeah, interesting. Now you mentioned
that's associated with memory consolidation and dealing with emotions.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if you know, from a actual physiological perspective, anatomical perspective, are the eyes actually rapidly moving the entire time through rapid eye movement sleep? They are.
I don't know if it's the entire time, but certainly when you're dreaming, I mean, that's why it's called rapid eye movement sleep. Yeah, it's a very, very quick movement of the eyes. I mean, it's actually used, that strategy is used in a type of cognitive therapy, you might call it cognitive behavioral therapy, called eye movement, EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And you might have seen it. It's the movement of the eyes. So when you think of a trauma or something that's happened, you move your eyes as you're thinking about the trauma, okay, and the what's called the bilateral stimulation of the eye movement and the memory somehow creates a new meaning to it. As you kind of process it, you create a new meaning to it. All right, so it's really the same kind of process that's used in that particular type of therapy. But again, I don't think anybody really knows exactly how it works, really. I think some people have got ideas and theories, but we know that it has some effect on memories, but the meaning of memories as well, and consolidating those memories.
Yeah,
So,
interesting. I just remember I've only ever seen it once when I had woken up and I sort of just rolled over and looked over at my wife, and she was facing towards me and her eyes were going nuts all over the place, and it was really rapid. And so I thought,
were her eyelids closed at the time?
Eyelids closed, eylids closed.
Oh,
but
right.
she was.
That would have been scary if it wasn't.
It was, yes, it would have been absolutely. But it was a little freaky, even with the eyelids closed. And I thought, oh, okay, so rapid eye movement is actually, rapid movements of the eyes. That was really
literally, like very, very rapid eye movements. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Like tracking the dreams, as it were.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, when you see your wife sleep, or indeed anybody sleep, you can actually tell what part of sleep they're in, because when people are in that deep sleep, it's a very slow, rhythmical type of sleep. Like you hear this without the wheezing at the beginning, it's just the normal sort of rhythmical sound. And it's quite nice. That's the deep sleep. And then you can tell when people turn into that sort of, dreamlike state, the REM sleep. So you hear this, and they turn over, and then you hear noises, and they're turning around. You can see the rapid eye movement, and something changes. It's usually in the breathing that changes, and if you can spot their eyelids, absolutely. That's really quite normal. It's really interesting.
And do dreams occur only during REM, or do dreams occur during deep sleep as well?
No, dreams occur during deep sleep, but you generally can't remember them, because when you REM sleep, you're generally coming out of sleep, and
right,
you usually forget dreams within sort of 10 to 15 minutes of waking up. Usually, so because you're quite close to wakefulness, you'll remember them. You see, but you do dream, and there are some sleep disorders where you might wake up dreaming. They're called night terrors. Sleep, and you can always tell night terrors because they tend to come earlier in the night when you're more likely to be in deep sleep, delta wave sleep, and also they come early in the sleep cycle as well. You see. So there's nothing really to worry about with night terrors, because they kind of take you can kind of you can look after somebody, because if you understand the sleep cycle, it's not going to actually last that long. You just need to comfort people, keep them safe, and as the night goes on, they'll be fine. It's nothing to. So it looks a little bit scary, but it's not really a problem as such.
Now, this is really interesting in terms of timing. Last night, I actually had, I don't tend to have nightmares or what you've described as night terrors, but last night I actually woke up. So I can remember that it was a fairly intense dream that I was dreaming. And at the end of the dream, I was dreaming that I was in my treatment room at the clinic, but I was asleep. I was in bed in the treatment room, and someone came through the door and they took something from the room and ran out of it. And I was yelling at them, wait, stop, help. And I was yelling help. And I actually woke up saying this, help. And my wife was rubbing me on the shoulder and saying, you okay? And we had a chat and a giggle about this morning, and I said, do I ever speak in my sleep? And she said, occasionally sort of mumble and things like that, but this was, yelling out for help. And it was one of those dreams where you want to do something, but you feel paralyzed. Is that type of dream and I can't actually remember having experienced this recently, but I remember when I was a child that I used to have these dreams where I would feel paralyzed and I couldn't do anything. Is there any significance to that type of dream, either with the stage of sleep or with the type of memories that are being consolidated, or what might have gone on in the day before?
No, that's really interesting. Well, firstly, to say that night terrors, they're different from nightmares. Because night terrors are in kind of deep sleep. Right? It's a specific sleep disorder. Nightmares are probably in the REM stage of sleep. So that's why you'll remember it. You see, when you woke up, and if it's particularly emotionally resonant, then you will remember the content. Okay.
And by the way, I can sort of timestamp this, because I know I turned off my phone, which again we can talk about whether that's a good thing or not. It's not turning out the lights; it's turning off the phone at 9:45. And when I woke up and had this sort of episode, I checked my phone and it was 11:55. And I was quite tired last night. I hadn't had as much sleep as I would have liked the night before, so I think I was falling asleep pretty quickly. So I'd probably been asleep for about 2 hours. So I'm not sure if that's sort of relevant at all, but. It was about,
no, that's consistent. You think about 2 hours, you think about the time it takes to sort of go into sleep, and then you're coming out of sleep, and after 2 hours, that's probably where you can remember to sleep, and that's why we know it's probably a nightmare, because you're in a REM type sleep, and you're probably close to wakefulness, and you're coming out of sleep. And it's quite normal to that paralysis. It's quite reassuring, really, because when your mind and your body goes to sleep, it creates this paralysis, so you can't act out your dreams. You see, it's like a fail safe. It's a safety mechanism in a sense. It's one way to see it. So But Sam, give me what are the 3 resonant words in your dream? If you could choose 3 words, what would they be? I'm not a dream analysis, but I'm just really curious, actually.
From last night's dream?
Yeah, three key words.
Help, stop.
Yeah.
Theft.
Theft. Okay. So
someone was taking something from me. Yeah, that was a very clear part of it. Right, and I guess intrusion, because I was in my room. Someone.
Give me. So these 3 words. No, three words. Help. So are you going with help?
Okay, let's change that. No, I'm going to change. Intrusion was a big word. Intrusion, theft, and help. There you go.
Your wife wasn't waking you up at that time, was she? No.
Was she what? I woke her up with me saying, "Help, help, help," and then she started rubbing my shoulder, and she said she was doing it from a distance because there have been episodes like years ago where I've actually elbowed her in the face in my sleep.
Right. Oh, well, there goes my theory about paralysis then, doesn't it?
Well, exactly, yeah. Yeah, back when a lot more of my time was spent in combative situations, and that was obviously reflected in the dream. But yeah, so
consolidating memories, absolutely.
Yeah,
Sports, consolidating memories, really important. That's why sports people, when they relax and they some people have a sleep before they perform.
yeah, and when I was training and competing a lot, I should say I would often sort of fall asleep and start kicking and just twitching or punching and things like that. But
Sam, you were fourth in the world, weren't you, in your sport? So you know that's a lot of consolidation.
yeah, of course. But yeah, I mean, going back to that dream, yeah, I'd say, yeah, and she, like I said, she was sort of trying to comfort me during that part, and she said I was still sort of awake and talking while she was just gently nudging me and saying, "You're okay."
So you're going for intrusion, theft, and help.
Yeah.
All right. So if I say to you one word, tell me the first word that comes into your mind. Intrusion.
House.
Okay. Theft.
Belongings.
Help.
Isolation. Helplessness.
Right.
Isolation.
Helplessness. Right. Okay. So house, belonging, helplessness. If you make a sentence with those three words.
I would feel helpless if belongings were taken from my house.
Yep.
I don't know.
Okay. No. So according to Richard Wiseman, that is a way you can interpret your dreams.
Okay.
So taking those three keywords, then doing an association with each word, and that might give you a clue about the meaning. Richard Wiseman's Night School. It's from that. If you're interested in dreams, and that's not very exciting, is it?
Yeah. Oh no, it's super interesting. I mean, but yeah, and for anyone who's interested, we'll put that in the show notes. If maybe if you can just send me the title of that afterwards. So moving on, then, what are some of the issues that people have with sleep? And actually, when I woke up in the middle of the night last night, once I was awake and thinking about it, I had trouble getting back to sleep because I was actually thinking maybe I should talk to Colin about this tomorrow. It'd be an interesting thing to throw in the show. And I'm sure that is something that people experience, is that, they wake up in the night and have trouble getting back to sleep because they're thinking about things. But what are some of the common things that you see and that you treat in terms of sleep?
Well, I think the big one is insomnia. As I say, not being able to sleep. I mean, I see a lot of other sleep disorders as well, which I can't necessarily treat, but I might be able to recognize them. Things like sleep apnea, for example, nightmares. Again, I see people that do have nightmares. I was going to say, Sam, the other thing about nightmares is you can, once you have a kind of meaning about what the nightmare might be, you can re-script it. A nightmare doesn't have to end the moment it finishes. You can kind of run the dream on and create kind of new meanings to it as well. You see, particularly if you have recurrent nightmares.
I can run after this guy who stole whatever it was from my room and chase him down.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. Okay. That's right. Yeah. So also, things like worry, mood disorders, anxiety, depression, grief, trauma, anger, all of these things might be issues that might, affect people's sleep and keep them awake at night, worrying or these emotions or other things as well can, keep people awake. I mean, things like pain, for example, can be quite a common thing.
That's a big thing that we see, and certain conditions will cause night pain more than others, but anything that is relatively intense in terms of the pain and has an inflammatory component will often will cause difficulty going to sleep, but then have a predictable pattern of waking after about 4 or 5 hours. When you get that inflammation that's pulling, people will often report waking up. we obviously, look at a night pain also as a red flag for some other non-musculoskeletal conditions. Which so we're big on talking about pain at night and sleep. But for a lot of orthopedic conditions, it gets difficult because we know that sleep is such a important restorative mechanism that if the pain is interrupting the sleep, then that's interrupting the recovery, which is then causing pain and you can get into a bit of a vicious cycle there. But I'm sorry, I interrupted. But that's
No, that's really important. Because pain, that inflammation can definitely impact sleep. Particularly if there's stress around that as well. People are waking up and somebody unhelpful thoughts. And I've got this pain, and why is this happening? And now I can't sleep, and then there's another problem, and it's all the stuff that's going to keep you awake, really. Other things as well, just to say, might be things like alcohol and medications. Even sleep medications can have if you continue to take them, particularly the prescribed benzo Z medications, you really shouldn't be taking them more than a week or 2 weeks, really, because they can have an unintended consequence of compounding a sleep problem in the longer term. Those are all reasons. When alcohol, 1 unit of alcohol takes 1 hour to get out of your body, and when it leaves your body, you wake up. It disrupts your sleep cycle. It's really not a good idea to if you have a sleep problem, to drink.
And I guess that's a lot of people report that they get to sleep easier if they've had a few drinks, but that's obviously can disrupt then the quality of the sleep, even if they do feel like they're falling asleep.
That's right. That's right. And then the period waking up in between the sleep cycles.
So are you able to go into maybe a little bit more detail about the alcohol and how that actually influences it? Does it influence different the length of the sleep cycles? Does it influence sort of the time spent in deep sleep, or how does it work?
I think it's all of those. I think it's it disrupts the sleep cycle. It's a stimulant in the short term, but in the longer term, it's a depressant. So people will find that if they're using alcohol to manage stress, they'll find that the next day, having not had a great night's sleep, because things like dehydration, maybe having to get up and go to the bathroom, just simple things, restlessness, as the alcohol has been metabolized through your body, the restorative aspect, the work that your body has to do to get rid of the alcohol. You wake up the next morning, you might be even feeling even more stressed because of the effects of maybe not having a great night's sleep and the alcohol. And so later that day, to manage the stress, you might get into that unhelpful pattern of then drinking, which then creates more stress. And the next day you manage that by drink, and it just really compounds the problem, really. So I think that's the main issue with alcohol. We know it disrupts the sleep cycle. And I've got those figures, by the way, of the stages of sleep. Rapid eye movement seems to be around 25%, deep sleep around 50%, and then the rest is sort of going into sleep and coming out of it. I might be mistaken about that, but that seems to be what the information I have here is telling me. But it's out there somewhere, I'm sure.
Okay. Interesting. And so then what are some of the common interventions that now obviously it's going to be condition and person dependent, but what are some of the common things that you employ to improve people's sleep?
Well, as you know, I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist, and I treat insomnia primarily as a sleep disorder, as a sleep problem. Just to be clear, some of the other things we would see, might be treated a little bit differently, and also there are some things that CBT wouldn't treat, things like sleep apnea. Okay, so if snoring and stopping breathing, and during the night, waking up, feeling really unnourished, and not being able to fall asleep, and feeling like you've got a hangover and you haven't drunk, all of that stuff, can point to sleep apnea. That's quite common actually. You should always get that checked out by your GP, because there's some good interventions for that, physical interventions. There are other things like restless leg syndrome, other things like the onset of things like diabetes and stuff like this. So if you can't sleep, you always go and check it out with your doctor first and foremost. Okay, but with the caveat that insomnia is really, really common, and really the way we would treat it is to look at what is causing it. We'd formulate it a little bit more. So what is it? Is it falling asleep? Is it waking up early? Is it the periods of time between sleep? What is it precisely that is the problem? And what we might do is try and take a baseline. We'd work out what's called a sleep efficiency figure. That would be very important. That's probably be the first thing I would do with treating insomnia. And sleep efficiency is basically keeping a sleep diary and working out the total time that you spend in bed versus the total time that you're asleep. Okay, you total that up over a week, divide it by the amount of days, put one figure over the other, times it by 100, and that gives you your sleep efficiency. Okay, and if your figure is around kind of 80-85%, that's pretty good sleep efficiency, because there's always a run up to sleep. There's always some periods of time when you're awake in the middle of sleep, sometimes come out of sleep as well, you see. So if the figure is below 80%, you're probably, our mantra is to talk about quality, not quantity of sleep. So really, you want to pull those sleep cycles together, okay, in one longer term sleep. So you're not worrying about being awake, and not worried I can't sleep and I'll wake up and I can't get back to sleep. It's fine. Never catastrophize about not being able to sleep. Because you can't sleep on command. Once you start worrying about sleeping, that in itself can cause wakefulness. I think it was Oscar Wilde that once said, he's always good for a quote, it's Oscar Wilde. He said the two things the two things you should never try too hard to do are to look cool and to try too hard to sleep. Okay, well, I know about one of those anyway. First one.
Yeah.
So you should never try too hard to do either of those, because there's a paradoxical intention where you need to be tired in order to be able to sleep, really. So once you get into bed and you're trying to force yourself to sleep, it ain't going to happen, you see. So we use that knowledge, and we really encourage people to go to sleep when they're tired. If they wake up in the middle of the night and they can't sleep, we encourage them to get out of bed, okay, and to go and do something else, and don't return to bed until they're tired. So that so we're basically trying to reset the sleep cycle. I mean, it's funny how people unlearn how to sleep. It's simple, but it's not simplistic. You have to be tired in order to sleep. So we're just resetting it. And the strategy is called sleep restriction. It's not for everybody, okay? It is just about pulling together the sleep. So that's one thing, certainly, that we would do.
Yeah, and just calculating that sleep efficiency. Do you use sort of apps, smartphone apps, smartwatches, trackers, things like that? What do you think about those? I mean, what do you think about the accuracy of them? And if you're not using those, how are you sort of measuring that sleep?
Well, we're just taking figures of the time that you go to bed, time that you get out of bed, and a rough time of when you're asleep, and any significant times when you were awake for more than 15 to 20 minutes during the night. These are all rough figures, okay? Yeah. So that's how I would do it. I wouldn't use apps to do it. I might use templates. So there's quite a helpful app called Sleepio, which is a CBT app, which I quite like. I wouldn't, trackers, they're okay. I guess, if you don't have a sleep problem, why not? Trackers are absolutely fine. But the issue is, if you're worried about sleep, trying to do things too perfectly can increase, worry about sleep. Oh, I didn't get that cycle right, and it's different for everybody. If you're worried about sleep and you're worried that you're not getting it right, I'd say ditch the tracker. But for other people, it might be helpful.
Yeah.
It's hard to interpret those figures as well sometimes, because actually when you talk about a 90-minute sleep cycle, if you see the rough sleep architecture of a sleep cycle, it's very hard to determine where the sleep cycle is. You need to really kind of clean that data up to be able to see the sleep cycle you see. And so apps are kind of measuring something that is kind of imperfect, you see, but good enough, So it's a perfect app to measure something that's not perfect. So different for everybody.
Yeah. Okay. And so what are the other strategies that you're about to launch into there?
Other ones, okay, so that's sleep restriction to reset the clock. There's this idea of sleep hygiene, which again, if you're doing it too perfectly, it can create anxieties about sleeping. So things like making sure your bed is comfortable. When was the last time you changed your bed? Making sure you're creating a separation between places where you relax and your bed, for example. So creating the association between bed and sleep. Your bed should only be used for sleep and intimacy, nothing else. No playing your guitar in bed, or using your laptops or stuff if you have a sleep problem. Okay. So you need to create that separation.
Maybe you should tell my kids that's what the bed's for, and that it's not a trampoline.
Yeah. But if they have a sleep problem, if they haven't got a sleep problem, that's absolutely cool. Yeah. Unless it's a bunk bed.
Well, I just wish they'd use their own beds as trampolines rather than ours. But ours is a bit bigger, and that's why that happens.
Yeah. So usual sleep hygiene stuff. Temperature. Making sure your room is not too hot, not too cold. You've got the appropriate PJs. You haven't got like thermal PJs in the summer. All the usual stuff, really.
Yeah. What about things like device usage and either fluid or food consumption prior to bed? I know just myself, I feel like a bit of an old man because I will often get up to go to the bathroom several times throughout the night, and I've actually tried to purposely limit my water consumption in the last few hours before going to bed to try to help amend that. And actually, I've been sort of focusing on that the last couple of weeks, and it's actually been quite effective. The device usage I'm not great with. I do have it's supposed to be a blue light cover on my phone. I do have some glasses which I'll wear when my son hasn't taken them to pretend to be Clark Kent before he turns into Superman. They're sometimes sitting on my bedside table. They're sometimes not there. Any of those sort of things that you think either are effective or perhaps not as effective as they claim to be?
No, I think they're all helpful. I don't think there's one solution. I think they're all kind of, different strategies, aren't they? So for example, don't go to bed hungry, but then don't go to bed just after you've had a heavy meal. Exercise. Your body needs to cool down. One of the when you actually fall asleep, it's a complicated mechanism of the circadian rhythm and the light-dark cycle and the level of melatonin, the homeostasis and the internal system of the body, and your temperature. And when you fall asleep, your body temperature reduces ever so slightly. Okay, and if you've been exercising just before you go to bed, your body's hot, and if you take a bath immediately before you go to bed, your body's hot. It needs time to cool down. So the rule of thumb I've heard and it's different in different places. I've heard 3 hours, don't exercise 3 hours before you go to bed. Yet other people swear that they go for a run before they go to bed and that helps them sleep.
Yeah.
It's different. It's different for
Individual.
everybody. So there's no hard and fast rule. You've got to find out what works. It's like eating. Some people have a snack in the evening, but don't have a heavy meal before you go to bed. Alcohol, not too much of it. Allow, a wind down time before you go to bed. Maybe stop the devices, the electronic devices.
Not going to
I mean,
happen.
there is
Next question. No, I'm just
no,
kidding. What about caffeine? We've sort of spoken about alcohol.
yeah, caffeine, stimulants caffeine and nicotine can be a real
Yeah,
problem. That's why alcohol can be a problem as well, because in it, short term, it's a stimulant. So
yeah, yeah,
caffeine has a half-life. So you got to just test out what works for you. The bad news is, if you have insomnia, can you guess what time the rule of thumb is where you shouldn't really have any caffeine, considering it's a half-life for it to kind of stop by the time you go to bed? You know what the rule of thumb is? It's
Well, I've
not.
heard sort of midday, but I guess that's even earlier than that, or
Yeah, it's
yeah,
midday. Yeah, it's not
yeah,
great, is it? If you like a cup of tea in the afternoon, but it's different for everybody. You need to find out
yeah,
what works, and there's caffeine in different things as well. You'd be surprised. Things like
yeah,
pain, some headache tablets. Some antihistamine
yep,
medications. There's caffeine. Obviously Coca-Cola and Sunny D and stuff like that. There's caffeine in things you wouldn't
yeah,
necessarily think there would be. So it can have an effect. It's just, I think, about testing what works for you, really. So I don't think there's a hard and fast rule with it. I think you
mm,
just need to kind of, experiment and test out if you have a problem
yeah.
sleeping. And nicotine can be a real problem. It's an illusion of relaxation. It's really not good for you. And most smokers, on average, sleep 30 minutes less than non-smokers anyway.
Interesting. Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on napping?
Uh, yeah, napping's really interesting. I think if you have insomnia, it can be a problem because as you go through the day, you build up a sleep debt. Okay, so that's the complicated system when you fall asleep. So the circadian rhythm, as it gets darker, you build up this chemical melatonin, and it's a little bit like an elastic band that gets stretched and stretched and stretched, and by the end of the day, it gets so tight, you just bang, you let it go, and that's when you fall asleep. Okay. Now the problem with napping, if you have insomnia, if you have a sleep problem, is that it can affect the tightness of that elastic band. You see,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
you might
interesting.
not get the snap and the falling asleep. So if it has that effect on you, then don't don't nap, I would say. Having said that, caveats are that if you're operating heavy machinery, or if you're have to drive, or if you're going to take a long flight or something, you might want to try and, that there's always exceptions to that. If you do sports, for example, like your sports, Sam, did you ever nap before you fought? I mean, did
I
you know
didn't know.
people would? Do you know people that
Yeah,
would
and
be able
actually,
to do
it's
that?
more common in Japan that some of the fighters would actually get to a tournament, and yeah, because we would often have several fights in a day, they would sleep in between fights, which I just thought was
Yeah,
ludicrous. Like I'd be so
yeah,
amped that there was no way I'd be able to sleep. But yeah, that was actually pretty common. But I
yeah,
hadn't actually seen it in Australia or other parts of the world. It was more something that I saw when I was coming to Japan.
yeah, exactly, yeah. And some people really use that to their advantage
Mm.
because, as I say, the idea of sleep consolidating memories, as if you're an elite sports person, images, the way you kind of script, the way you're gonna, play out your um, game, using images. Sometimes, when people sleep, they really consolidate those kind of images. Some really elite, sports stars do that. For that
Yeah.
reason, there's something about being able to relax and using imagery and then sleep, and somehow those memories, they get consolidated and they can really enhance performance for some people. So, again, it's different for everybody. If you have insomnia, as a rule of thumb, naps are probably not great.
And then just in terms of amounts, right off the bat, we sort of talked about that average time being sort of 7 to 9 hours, but that range being 5 to 11. Obviously, we sort of encounter people that can function more effectively off lower amounts of sleep. I've also heard that consistency in the amount of sleep that you're getting is perhaps more important or as important as the total amount. What influences how much sleep people actually need? What are some of the things there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's different for everybody. I think genetics plays a part, of how much sleep you need. I mean, some people have a gift where they, some people will sleep 4 or 5 hours and be quite happy with that. Early morning radio DJs, are great with that. There's been recorded instances of people needing, 2 hours sleep. The politician Margaret Thatcher famously slept for 4 hours a night. Napoleon slept for 4 hours a night, apparently, although he did make some pretty poor decisions in the end, didn't he? People like Einstein would sleep 9 hours, 10 hours a night. So I think it's different for everybody. Things like owls, larks, I think that's more kind of about our environment, really. And also, I think the amount that we need, is a bit of a moving target, because if we've got a cold or, feeling a bit run down, we're going to sleep more. And actually the sleep cycle, our body clock isn't exactly 24 hours. It's something like 24.1 hours. So that's why sometimes people, they sleep in at the weekends, It's just to catch up. And actually teenagers have a body cycle, it's thought of something like 24.4 hours, which is why their kind of cycle kind of changes and they go to bed a lot later, you see. So
and they come in for a physio appointment and they're essentially still asleep when you try to talk to them.
Basically, yeah.
Not all teenagers, but you do.
No, I mean that is particularly early morning. They will still be asleep because they're going to bed much later, and that's because of their body clock. We think kind of works slightly differently, and they just need more sleep for brain consolidation as well. Lots of REM sleep. They just need that. So I think it's different for everybody. If you have insomnia, I think the rule of thumb is not to vary your sleep by more than an hour, at the weekends. But otherwise, some people swear by, a lie-in, and that's probably because the body, they probably need to catch up for different reasons, whatever that is. So consistency, but not over a few days. I think consistency you should measure over weeks, really.
Sure. Yeah. I know I always, I've got some clients that sort of exist off 4 or 5 hours sleep and they can function very well and they don't
report some people
much
do.
tiredness. And I sort of think to myself, because, I sort of want, even though I do consider myself a fairly high output person, I think, well, maybe if I could get by on an extra or an hour less a night, I could get so much more done. And if someone else, if Margaret Thatcher can get by on 4 hours sleep, why do I need 6 or 7 or 8? And then I try it and I just feel wrecked, and I just don't feel good.
And
I sort of feel
is it?
Yeah, that's right. And I do sort of feel jealous. It's like, why can they get by with that sort of sleep and I can't? But
I need 7.5. That's me. I can't. It's hard. 7. It's hard to survive on less. Really. It's just the way some people are. Some people need more. So. But I'd say think of it more in cycles. So for example, if you're a new mum, for example, your sleep's going to get really kind of messed up because you're on this totally different cycle, so therefore you take it in 90 minutes, you just go with it, and you can see it differently, right? You don't have to bring it all together, you can see it in sort of 90 minute
Yeah.
bursts. You take it when you can.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
yeah.
I think, a quote from one of my favorite people of all time, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who famously said, you have 18 hours, you have 24 hours in the day, there's 18 hours to be productive and then 6 hours to sleep. And some people say, well, I need 8 hours sleep, and I would just recommend that you sleep faster. I like that. But I've been trying to sleep faster for my entire life, and it hasn't really worked for me.
Yeah. Well, sleep isn't wasted time, is it? It's restorative, and it's really important for consolidation. It's just everybody's different. It's just a range. It's just the way it is, isn't it? And some people are just very, very fortunate that they have more hours that they're awake, aren't they? I feel jealous as well. I'd like to be able to do that.
Yeah. Right. Anyway, we've been going for almost an hour. Is there any other sort of quick little things on sleep that you think that people ought to know, or we sort of covered everything that we wanted to do?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we've covered pretty much everything. I think just the main thing is we can't sleep on command. It's like don't worry about not being able to sleep. Just be like these people that don't need sleep. Do something, and don't catastrophize it. When you need sleep, it will happen.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Well, if people are sort of having issues with sleep and would like to consult you and make the most of your services, we'll put up the links on the show notes. But
thanks, Sam. Yeah.
cbt.tokyo, is that best place to find you? Yep. Terrific. All right. Well, thanks again for your time today. Really appreciate you coming on the show again. And hopefully we'll have you on in the not too distant future to discuss some other issues. For the listeners, if you do have any other topics that related to mental health that you would like Colin to speak about, please let us know. And we'll get him back in.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate that.
All right. Take care, Colin. Have a great rest of the day.
All right. Take care. Bye. Bye.